Coming up on Random Fit, myself, Wendy Batts, and Ken Miller are going to be talking about pre-season conditioning, the high school edition.
If you have a high schooler, if you're a high schooler yourself, figure out through Wendy and I on how we made it through high school and playing the different sports that we have and the high schoolers that we work with. We're going to share some insights on what you can do to compete the best you can in season, but also more importantly, be as prepared as you can possibly be for that season. So like, follow, subscribe, download, and enjoy the episode.
You're listening to Random Fit with hosts Wendy Batts and Ken Miller, winner of a Gold Markham Award for Digital Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Random Fit. I am Wendy Batts here with my friend and co-host Ken Miller. Ken, how's it going?
Things are going great, Wendy. How you doing?
I am well. This week we are going to be talking about preseason conditioning, more so for the high schoolers. So we're going to do a high school edition. And Ken, I know that this was one that was near and dear to your heart. And you're like, this is the perfect time to bring it out just because there's a lot of things going on. So why don't you start us off?
Well, I think going back to when we were talking about sports and conditioning, I know with the type of clientele that you have, professional athletes, where you have a definite off season and you have a definite in season, where let's say with basketball, you have the summers off and then you start up, in the fall. But when it comes to high school, where you're dealing with multiple sports, there's a very, very much a gray area if you're playing multiple sports. But in light of the fact that, a lot of kids not just play high school sports, but they're also playing sports in the summer. Like they're playing AAU basketball, they're playing summer league travel baseball. And so you don't really get that off season. But when we're talking about the high school athlete, we're just basically all we want to do is bring to light the fact that, not everything's clear cut, but there are some strong considerations that when you're working with a high schooler as a personal trainer, if you're a parent of a high schooler who plays a sport or multiple sports, some things that you want to keep in mind when it comes to making sure that your high school athlete not only can perform well once it's time to play for the season, but what are we going to do to help kind of mitigate excess stress and the situation where aches and strains and sprains and other things that are indicators of injury, we keep those things at bay.
Well, and I find it interesting because often this time of year, especially if there are kids that are going to go and play football or they're getting ready for whatever it is that they're doing, I always ask them, I'm like, are you looking forward to starting practice and being with your friends and your teammates? And, they had tryouts, they did that. And then there's a couple weeks off and they get ready for school. And then they're not, okay, we're going to start practice on this day. Or even when you think, I know we're talking about high schoolers, but if you even think about college, there's that time in between. And what I've seen with some of my clients who have high school kids, they don't do anything over the summer. They go out with their friends, they'll go on vacation, but they're not training and they're not working out anymore. They're not doing anything. And then as soon as they come back, they'll have tryouts, they'll do well in tryouts, and then they start practice and they're sick. They're, let's see who's going to be the first to throw up. Let's see who gets heat exhaustion because their body isn't acclimated to anything. So when you brought this to my attention, I'm like, this is perfect timing because we're hearing where I'm at of people that are having that the athletic trainers are on the field with some of these kids who are having heat issues, heat exhaustion. There was people that were called. There was somebody that almost had a heart attack. And these are high school kids, but they are not preparing for it. And, you've got to start thinking, what is the sport? And when's the right time to kind of look into doing something to getting them moving and acclimated to whatever their sport's going to be, whether it's indoors, outdoors, certain structures, meaning courts, whatever.
Yeah. I think to your point, Wendy, when we talk about, let's say if we're getting into the fall, let's just kind of take the school year from beginning to end. So as you brought up, Wendy, summertime is just, I mean, that's a big coin toss. So when I was a strength coach, um, at Cal, one of the things that, the one thing you hope for is that your athletes did something, or, anything, anything. Did you go out for a jog? Did you hit the gym with your buddy? Anything just to maintain some semblance of fitness and strength conditioning over the summer. Because once school started, then that's where you're just like, okay, well, let's see what we got. And all those fall sport coaches are thinking the same thing. What do we have, especially if you're playing, let's say a sport like football or volleyball or women's volleyball. Water polo is a fall sport. So you have your tryouts, and with my daughter, they've got tryouts the first day of school. So it's not like they have a lead up to school, but once school starts, that's where they have their tryouts. So first of all, get familiar with your environment, as you mentioned, Wendy, when it comes to heat stress. If the first time you went outside was when it was 103 degrees, and now you're going to have to run, jump, stop, fall, get up, and do that multiple times, hit somebody in pads. The first time you go outside and experience that heat, you don't want it to be when you have a helmet on, when you have pads on, right? Get acclimated, just get used to the temperature. So if you're like you brought up, when if you're inside, you're in a gym, you're on a basketball court where it's somewhat temperature controlled, that's fine. But if you're in the other side of things, you're outside and it's 100+ degrees, the heat index is 100+. Don't make that the first time you go outside. So outside of conditioning, just know what the environment is. And that's more from a safety standpoint, because as you brought up, Wendy, athletes passing out, because you have heat stress, heat stroke. Those are fatal situations. So
Yes.
from a conditioning standpoint, first things first, just know the environment and know what you're going to get into. And that's in addition to the conditioning side of things.
Well, and I think it's important too, when we're looking at, okay, we've got this high school athlete, what is it that they want to do? What sport do they want to play? You had just talked about maybe multi-sports, and I think that's awesome, because you are keeping yourself in good conditioning, hopefully, throughout the year. And it doesn't matter what sport you play. I did that. I ran track, I cheered, I did different things at different times of the year, so I could go one right into another, and felt like I had a good base. And so if you are going to have a child that is on one single sport, you want to think, okay, if your tryouts are this day, then give them a base. I think really working on an aerobic base, working on some strength, working on mobility. And I know, Ken, you and I both discovered the same information when we were looking at different research and stuff that's out there. The commonality is anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. You want to give yourself 4 to 8 weeks in order to really start to, before you go out there and try out, and then do it on a continuous basis to keep yourself in the best shape and conditioning, with reduction of hopefully injuries, unless they're contact. And I was like, well, okay, 4 to 8 weeks it is. If you are a single sport, and I've always heard that as well, and I haven't seen anything to say that that's changed.
And I think in the idea of trying out, Wendy, you have to get in shape for the tryout. It's not that you just try out and make the team and then you get in shape for the sport. If you're going to give it max effort in one singular moment, you want to be prepared for that moment as well. So when it comes to tryouts, and this is another thing, when it comes to the sport, if you know when that tryout is, get that 4 to 8 weeks, ideally 8 weeks at least. But now you've built up some confidence in what you can do, and that way when you are trying to jump, change direction, sprint, whatever the coach wants you to do to show that you deserve a spot on the team, that's your season right there. That's one way to look at it. That is your season, is actual tryout event. So give yourself, to your point, Wendy, ramp up time, but also consider that tryout as one moment that's going to set up the season, because you can if you just sit on the couch all summer, and if it comes the fall and then you're out of shape, it's going to show. And that's a reflection of not just your fitness or your strength or your level of power, but also a reflection of your discipline, and how well you can take care of yourself. So,
Well, and I
just
think
another thought.
that's a big key, because with some of my athletes, when their season is over, and I know Marty Miller, who uses this example, I've used it a ton of times too. But if you're a NASCAR, right, and you go and you do the Daytona 500, you're doing 500 laps, and the car's going in the same direction over and over and over again. You get more wear and tear on one side, but throughout the laps, they have these pit stops. They get new tires, they get gas, they make some corrections if they hit the wall or hit another car, and it's just band-aids until the race is over, and then whoever the winner is the winner. Well, I always tell an athlete, your body's kind of the same as a NASCAR, right? Throughout the season, you're running it really hard. You're putting a lot of wear and tear on there. And then when the season is over, just like the race is over, it's my job to help them rebuild that engine and that car to the max. So when it's going onto the starting line, it's going to be able to accelerate to its full potential. So when you're looking at it like that, and you can put that in the eyes of somebody that understands NASCAR or Formula One or whatever it is that you watch or have an example for, then as a high schooler, it puts in perspective, because a lot of these high school kids see my athletes come in and they're like, why are you here when the summer's over? And we are rebuilding their body to prepare them to be explosive from day one, to show that they should be the starting person, and they should get more minutes played than the next person behind them who's fighting for that same position. And so to that's the dedication. That's the vibe that I want them to have. I want them to have the drive to want to be that. That's the level they want to be at. But when they start to see some of these other higher athletes or elite athletes coming in, and that's what they're doing on their downtime, I'm telling them all year round, but we'll have to move in different directions. We say that with NASM every 4 to 6 weeks, get yourself reevaluated, look at your assessments, see if you're making progress. And I think sometimes we just think of the sport, and it's very sport specific, when it really should be body specific to help them in their sport.
Yeah. And I think, that's a great point, Wendy. So when we talk about that level of condition, you get that 4 to 6 weeks. Now, the other thing too is, again, I love that analogy when you and Marty bring that up. You just make it through, get through the finish line, and then we will fix things up. And what we are talking about there is basically addressing injury potential, because as you said, Wendy, you're going around that track, you're going to wear down those wheels, definite wear pattern that's going to be the same lap after lap after lap. So the same thing, if you're a right-handed thrower, you're going to have that same right to left when it comes to tension that's coming through your trunk and your torso, same muscles through the shoulders that are being used over and over and over again. But the one thing we need to also consider when preparing for your season is making sure that we've addressed muscle imbalances. So when it comes to looking at the injury potential, you can never predict, and I say this all the time, is like, you can never predict that somebody is going to get injured, and therefore if I can't do that, I can't predict how I'm going to prevent you from getting injured. So what we can address is injury potential. So by making sure that you're not just metabolically conditioned, like your cardiorespiratory fitness is there, you're fast, you're explosive, and you're strong, that's one thing. But are you recruiting the right muscles at the right times in the right planes of motion, just as a human being? So as you, Wendy, and you and I have talked about this many, many, many times, is that we have to get you moving as better as a human first, before we look at getting you moving better as a baseball player or a racquetball player, or fill in the sport. So addressing injury potential or the risk of injury means also moving more efficiently. So you've had an opportunity to look at, okay, well, are my ankles moving well? Are my hips mobile? Is my trunk dialed in? Do I have good core stability? Do I have good structural integrity through my shoulders for me to do what my sport is? So again, when it comes to why do we want to do preseason conditioning? Well, we want to make sure that we're in the best shape possible. And what for? So we don't get hurt. We want to perform well, but we also want to last through the season. So I love that analogy of the race car. So
Well, and that's really just talking about the body as our muscles and our bones and how we move, throughout our skin. But I think it's also important, like you said, you did kind of mention a little bit too, but on the anaerobic and aerobic conditioning, and thinking, okay, about our lungs, and are we able to withstand that many minutes, whether it's a basketball player that has to play, sprints going back and forth, whether it's a lacrosse player, a soccer player, that's a lot of time running back and forth. And so no matter what, I think it's important to build an aerobic base. That's your jogging, tempo runs, circuits, fartleks, little things like that. I think those are a really good way to start build a base. And then we go into the anaerobic intervals. And that's when we do a true hit. People are like, oh, I did a hit workout for 60 minutes. I'm like, did you now? But, like a true hit workout, or shuttle runs, or different types of sprints, or, lateral movements with different patterning that forces us to have to think, cut, or maybe it's unpredictable. You don't know what's coming next because I'm going to change it right on the spot. And then at that point, looking at, okay, we're getting closer to the season, and we know that we've got a good base. We know that we've got good sprints, but then thinking, okay, what does the sport demand? And we've got to think, okay, we're developing the different energy systems, like whether it's repeated sprints for soccer, or bursts for football, or bursts for basketball. And these are just some examples. I think when we start to look at it as a whole, and you're always changing what they're doing, but making sure that it makes sense and the body's prepared for that, we're setting them up for success. But then they're also going to go into the season in better shape and less likely, like you said, for the predictable injuries, because hopefully when they do their assessments and go through that, they're well above everyone else because they worked hard in the off season.
Right. So I do want to add on to that thought, Wendy, but before I do, I just want to say that this episode of Random Fit is brought to you by NASM One, the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources. Get the Edge app to schedule and program clients. Enjoy half off all certifications and specializations. Access free CEUs and more. All this for just $35 a month. Go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM One. So Wendy, when it comes to the preparation thing, and you talked about doing multiple sports. What sports did you do again?
I cheered, I danced, I ran track, I played tennis.
All in the same year?
Mm-hmm.
You could do 5.
Well, I mean, I didn't do tennis in the college, like in our high school, but I played like for fun at our rec, where my dad was a member, where we were a member.
Oh, got it.
So we played for fun, super competitive, but it wasn't I just played just when I could.
Just when you could.
Let's just say that. But no, I mean, I would go for cheer. Let's say we're doing that during football season. And as soon as that was done, sometimes they would overlap. I ran sprints. I was 400, 800 and mile relay. Those were my 3. I was a relay girl. I was good. I know. I've always been a team player.
Well, I know you're a power. I mean, because for one, to be a cheerleader, you got to be pretty powerful, right? Were you one of those that were doing like the back handsprings across?
Yeah, I was a flyer. I was small. I grew once I stopped. So maybe it's something about cheerleading may stump your growth, but yeah, I grew.
Well, the reason why I ask is because when I was growing up and I was playing sports, I did football in the fall, I did wrestling in the winter, and then I did track for a couple seasons, but then I wound up doing baseball. So my point to saying that and asking, because I was really curious about, I knew you did the cheer thing. Sprinting, I didn't know so much, but I know you're very active in tennis now. So my point to saying that is if you're talking about say a 3-star athlete, but if you're from
why am I only 3? What?
Well, I'd say you're a 5-star.
Did I tell you I was super competitive?
Can you fit that many sports in a season? But my point being is that you'll have your your fall, your winter, and your spring sports. So if we're talking about somebody who's just doing one sport, then you want to make sure that you build in your preseason conditioning to make sure that you're ready for that one sport. But if you're somebody who's like what I did, you got in shape playing football because you ran plenty. But then when it came to now migrating into the winter sport, that what I did in football got me somewhat set up for wrestling, right? Well, there's impact, there's hitting, we're running. I mean, it's not exactly the metabolic needs that a grappler needs, but you wrestle your way to shape. And then when I did play baseball, where that's not a whole lot of metabolic needs there, but I had to be powerful enough to throw the balls, sprint from home to first to second, around the bases, or as an outfielder, I had to be explosive to get to the ball. But my point to saying that is, if you're playing a sport, there may not be an exact transition from one sport to the other, but what I tell my kids and tell the parents of the kids that I work with is the fact that, hey, you're doing something. You're out there, you're rotating, you're squatting, you're lunging, and you name the sport, but you're active and you're getting some conditioning. Now you might want to add some, let's say, sports specific stuff. So if you're going from wrestling to baseball, you probably do want to keep some throwing or keep some shoulder health, programming in there for the sake of making sure that when it's time to put on the glove and throw a ball, that you have some coordination for that sport. But overall, if you're playing sport after sport after sport to hit the fall, the winter, and the spring, just know that sometimes you're going to get some of that ancillary condition. Like some people who do cross country in the fall, they're in some condition so that when spring comes around and it's time to do that 4x100, Wendy, you're in some shape for that next sport.
Well, and that's one of the reasons truly that I ran track. I did not like it, and then, but it was one of those that kept me in shape. And then I would play tennis, like I said, in the summer, just for fun, just so I could just continue to move, and I needed to be stronger. But yes, I mean, you have to continue to practice hone in your craft or whatever it is for your sport. So that's also important because muscle memory. I mean, it's easier to get back if you've done it your whole life and you know how to do certain drills or moves or flips or tumbles or whatever it may be. But, I think it's going to be important too that we mention some common pitfalls that I think, people need to avoid, because I think this is where we kind of get stuck as a parent as well. We're like, my son just tried out this past weekend and I'm like, oh man, he was doing different things this summer. And it was because I wanted him just I want him to love baseball if he wants to love baseball. But if I'm always constantly throwing it down his throat and that's the only sport that he's playing and that's all he knows, I'm doing him a disjustice, because again, repetitive motion, repetitive movement patterns, but it's also not challenging him to do something different. But I'm also like, oh man, we need to get out there. Like you said, throw the ball. Like we need him to go and pick up the bat and hit. And then it starts to get to be too much, too fast if we're not careful. Yeah. I mean, again, he was doing other things. So I felt comfortable saying, okay, let's go hit and let's go do this. But if he were to have been doing nothing besides being with his friends, playing video games, and I'm like, oh, you're going to go try out. We need to hurry up and get you in shape. And then I try to crush him over a weekend before tryouts. That's where we start to see soft tissue injuries. We start to see them get really sore. We see the body break down, and then they get into making the team, hopefully. And then those constant repetitive movement patterns, it's not a good setup. It is not. So you really want to be careful with that.
Yeah. And I think when you're young, you think you're Superman, you think you're invincible. If you go straight to the 1 to 5 reps, right? 1 to 5 rep max, and it's your first day back. It's like, there's no tissue tolerance, right? You haven't built anything up. So to that point of too much, too fast, if they're trying to go for a running back position, they're going to try and run the fastest 40 they can all year. But, structures like the foot and ankle, the Achilles, the calf, the knee, can that do the work that you want it to do today? Maybe 4 weeks from now, but not today. Right. Yeah. So that's a big part of it. And I think, one other pitfall is the fact that in light of what we know today about the need for recovery, and you and I, Wendy, have said this many times on Random Fit, is that, we're really good at putting stress into the body, but how good are we at managing or taking stress out of the body? So recovery, you and I will talk about it with our clients who are older, but you know what? The best time for someone to learn about recovery is the teens, right? Because hey, their body's gonna go through it. So why not teach them how to manage physical stress?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And nutrition, what to eat, what you're putting in your body is fueling the system, and what you put into it is what you get out of it. That's what I always tell my clients, especially my younger guys. If you want to be the best, then we're going to have that mentality, and you're going to do what it takes for you to be the best. And that means you're going to have to look at your nutrition. You're going to have to look at your rest. You're going to have to think about possible recovery boots or some recovery percussion devices or something along those lines that's going to help you get ready for the next day while you're hopefully doing some sort. It doesn't have to be we're hitting hard every single day, because we've talked about, Ken, you and I have talked about different ways of doing active recovery. It doesn't mean when we say recovery that you just sit there. It's doing stretching, it's doing yoga type things, it's going for walks, it's foam rolling, it's doing things that are going to benefit you. So the next time you do go hard, whether it's in the gym or at practice or with your team, your body is more prepared and in better alignment than if you did nothing. I think that's the biggest thing. Coaches are really becoming more and more focused on individualization. I know that I've been hired by multiple teams to come out and do pre-assessments with the teams so we can do like an individualized corrective program that they do before they actually go and meet with their strength and conditioning coach. And I'm seeing this more and more, and I love being a part of it, because I feel like that's what's lacking is, the coaches will have the entire team do this dynamic warm up, and then they go and everyone's doing the same thing. When if we can just do a little bit of individualization first, it's going to help the actual students or athletes, if you will, prepare the way that they need to prepare. And I think we're seeing coaches kind of have that mindset, which I'm loving. Not all sports, but I know there's certain sports that we're getting there. And then I think that we're also looking to see coaches not just going out and trying to run them. Let's see who's going to throw up first. Right. Let's see who's passing out first. Let's see who's the strongest and who's going to be the first to say I can't or give up. I mean, I'm not saying, we're focusing on raising the weak, because I'm all about, you got to push your limit, but then there's also a time to be like, okay, enough's enough, and looking at proper progression throughout the season. I've seen more people focusing on that, and I mean, only time will tell, but if you could do your part 4 to 8 weeks before the actual sport and start working on something that's going to help develop yourself or your athlete, then it's a win.
Yeah, and I think one last point, Wendy, is that when a high school athlete has taken the time, they've done that 4 to 8 weeks leading up to the season, that's a big confidence builder. And I think I said this before, but if you can build that team camaraderie, don't be the only guy that's out there. If you know who your teammates are, you can get a hold of them. Make it a group thing, because now it's like it's bringing together your team, and you're actually fostering that aspect of leadership. And that if you're putting in the work, that person next to you is putting in the work, then there's going to be that higher level of trust when it comes to, okay, can I trust this person to be in shape? Can I trust this person to have the discipline to do what they're supposed to do when it really matters? So that mental psychosocial side of sports definitely plays a role when you as an individual do what you need to do to be in the best shape that you can. But if you can take somebody along with you who's going to be in the same sport, maybe take that same journey with you, that just builds confidence all the way around. So there's that part. I mean, that's not the side that usually gets addressed when it comes to preseason conditioning, but I think it's a part that can make a difference, especially when maybe you don't have a winning record and morale is low, but at least you know that you did what you could to put the best efforts forward when it's time to compete.
Well, and you guys can look this up. I don't have to throw out any names, but there was a professional athlete that would always say in every interview and every documentary and everything, no one will outwork me ever. And so every time people would go and work with them, his job was to make sure no one outworked him. And it was because he wanted to be pushed. And he was also going to show that he wasn't going to give up, and he was going to do what it took to be the best on the court or whatever sport he was in. So if you go in with that mentality, or if you have kids that are going to play a sport and you try to teach them that mentality, you work hard and you work harder than everyone else, you will become the best. If that's the mentality you want to teach, it's one that really works. And it's one that we say too, are you going to work harder than him? Yes. Well, then show me. And it's fun because then it's competitive. And remember, if you're working with athletes, especially high school, that's when the competitive really comes out, and it makes for a very fun session. And something to think about.
Something to think about.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this topic up. I know we had just been talking about all these different sports are coming up. We've got a bunch of different players coming in, finishing, starting. It's like a lot. And so I thought this was, when you said let's do it, perfect timing. And thanks for.
Yep. Never a bad time to think about preparation, right? Just be ready all the time. So Wendy, thank you for your insight on this topic about preseason conditioning, the high school edition. We might have another edition coming up. Who knows? But for those of you listening to us, both Wendy Batts and I, Ken Miller, here on this episode of Random Fit, thank you so much for your time and giving us your attention for this episode. So all we ask is follow, subscribe, download, share. Let us know what you want to talk about on other episodes, future episodes when it comes to Random Fit. So until next time, everybody, take care and be well.